New Year's Day, 1945. An American forward airbase in Belgium called Y-29 is in the crosshairs of a massive German assault. Part of a desperate last-ditch Luftwaffe offensive designed to shatter Allied air power in Europe. Now, you're in the cockpit as P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts rise to defend their own territory in an extraordinary fight known to history as the Legend of Y-29. Experience the battle. Dissect the tactics. Relive the dogfights. January 1st, 1945. 8:30 a.m. A flat, wintry plain near Asch, Belgium. Slag heaps dot the horizon like giant slate-gray pyramids. Nestled in this vast expanse is the American forward airbase designated Y-29. At the north end of the field, P-47 Thunderbolts of the 366th Fighter Group prepare for takeoff, tasked with a close air support mission over the Ardennes.
Well, we, of course, had a New Year's party. I had a slight hangover, not too bad. So you could say we were 8 sort of semi-groggy fellas that took off that morning.
At the south end of the field, blue-nosed P-51 Mustangs of the 352nd Fighter Group idle on the taxiway. Group Commander Lieutenant Colonel J.C. Meyer has tried all morning to obtain permission for a patrol, but 9th Air Force Command has denied his request.
There was to be a large mission of escort, and 9th Air Force was trying to keep the fighters on the ground in order to use them on that mission. Well, J.C. sat there and thought about it a while. He said, why don't we just get our airplanes and go out and sit on the end of the runway and see what happens?
On this morning, J.C. Meyer's suspicion of a German attack will pay off. At that very moment, across the front lines, a massive armada of over 850 German Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt Bf 109s descends on the Allies. A surprise attack meant to break Allied air superiority over Europe in a single brutal stroke. Separated into formations of approximately 60 aircraft, they will strike 17 Allied airfields in the Netherlands, Belgium, and northern France, destroying as many aircraft on the ground as they can. The offensive is designated Operation Bodenplatte.
Bodenplatte means ground plate, meaning they're going to grind their boot heel into the Allies' Air Force and grind them to a pulp. They knew that the Americans and the British were pretty cocky by this time. And New Year's Eve and New Year's, they're celebrating. They're going to all be drunk.
But Bodenplatte suffers an early setback. To maintain secrecy, German flak units were not informed of the attack.
Well, the Luftwaffe flak units, anytime they saw a large armada, it had to be the Allies. We had tremendous air superiority. So they were trigger happy. They saw these airplanes coming over, they started firing.
One quarter of Bodenplatte's effective strength is reduced by friendly fire. Nonetheless, the Germans press on. Among the many fighter squadrons are the men of Jagerschwader 11, comprised of 40 FW-190s and 24 Bf-109s. 30 miles northeast of Asch, Belgium, they turn south. Their target is Y-29. At 9:15 a.m., 8 Thunderbolts take off at Y-29, commanded by Captain Lowell B. Smith. Smith flies lead in the first flight of 4. The P-47s form up and head east. Just as the Jug pilots settle in for the trip to the front, Lieutenant Jack Kennedy spots flak bursts to the north over a British airfield designated Y-32.
That was probably the first indication that any of the airborne pilots knew that the Germans were in the area.
Then another Jug pilot, Lieutenant Mel Paisley, breaks in over the radio. Bandits, 2 o'clock low.
I think that was the first time any of us had seen flying German aircraft. And it was a whole gaggle of them. But we were so anxious to get into a dogfight, we just said, the hell with it.
The Americans jettison their bombs and prepare to attack.
We just surprised them. I've read some of the German accounts, and they said, where in the expletive did these Thunderbolts come from?
Mel Paisley draws first blood in the battle.
He took the initiative and dived to meet the first German, pretty much nose to nose. That Luftwaffe fighter broke off and tried to escape to the east of the airfield.
But the evasive tactic fails. Behind Paisley, Lowell Smith barrels into the chaos, attacking an FW-190 from above. A well-aimed burst downs a second enemy plane. Simultaneously, Bob Brule spots a 190 just off the ground. Brule wings over and maneuvers into his enemy's 6 o'clock.
I almost slammed into the ground from his prop bar. Scared me, actually. Ooh.
The German is so close to the ground, Brule can't aim his guns low enough. But the young fighter pilot has an itchy trigger finger. He fires anyway.
Now, we only have 20 seconds of firepower. So even if you just go brr, 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 you do that 10 times, you used up half your ammunition.
As Brule battles his 190 on the deck, full-throttle combat in the Furball rages. P-47 pilot Jack Kennedy zeroes in on a Focke-Wulf.
He closed so near to the German that he said the silhouette just filled up his gun sight. And in the limited time available, he triggered a short burst, and he was hitting it when his plane, in turn, was hit hard from behind.
Cannon and machine gun rounds from an unseen pair of 109s slam into Kennedy's Jug. His right wing bursts into flame.
He actually went so far as to unstrap his shoulder harness, thinking that he would bail out. But when he looked over, he realized that the right side of his Thunderbolt was streaming flames, so rather than try a low-altitude parachute jump, he just stayed in the airplane.
Kennedy ducks into the slag heaps northeast of Y-29. hoping to lose the 109s in the chaos. But the Germans hold fast. Jack Kennedy and the rest of the Thunderbolts need help. The P-47s have engaged the German formation 4 miles north of Y-29. The cavalry, 12 P-51 Mustangs of the 352nd Fighter Group, idle on the runway at the airbase. The 9th Air Force has continued to deny them permission to take off. But J.C. Meyer, a born leader and skilled tactician, is still wary.
J.C. Meyer was one heck of a leader. I would have flown through hell with him and back.
Suddenly, at 9:20 a.m., Meyer spots flak to the north. All the confirmation he needs.
He says, let's go. And I looked at him and I thought, quickly, it just went through my mind, this is either a decoration or this is a courts-martial taking off without permission.
The Mustangs throttle up and roll down the runway, accelerating towards takeoff speed of 90 miles per hour. J.C. Meyer lifts off, immediately spotting an FW-190.
One of the classic snapshots of the war occurred when John C. Meyer was still bringing his landing gear up, and he was out of time. He was nose to nose with the Focke-Wulf 190, so he ignored bringing his wheels up, just put the 190 in his gun sight, pressed the trigger.
The 190 flames and careens out of control towards the rest of the Mustangs, still lifting off the runway. Meyer's victim slams into the ground in front of Lieutenant Sandy Moats, but Moats manages to avoid disaster. In rapid succession, the rest of the blue-nosed bastards of Bodney take to the air.
We had an outstanding fighter group, the 352nd. As General Kepner said, we were second to none.
The frantic opening moments of the battle give way to full-blown aerial combat among the treetops surrounding Y-29. One of the greatest dogfights in history has begun. January 1st, 1945. At 9:20 a.m., the men of the 352nd Fighter Group, the blue-nosed bastards of Bodney, take to the skies over Y-29. Lieutenant Ray Litke with his wingman Al Rigby accelerate away from the airfield. Suddenly, Al Rigby spots an FW-190 swinging in behind his flight lead. Rigby instinctively calls a left brake. If Litke brakes left and the 190 follows, Rigby will have an easy shot at the German.
So I said, Litke, brake left. I don't know what kind of tones I used, but he did, and that Focke-Wulf 190 was right on his tail.
The move works.
I see hits from the tail up through the cockpit. He just rolls over and goes in. At this time, I lose Litke. I watch that guy go in, and Litke's gone. And there are so many aircraft that I'm not about to pick him out. But here, I'm sitting here, and here comes a Focke-Wulf 190 underneath me just on the treetops.
Rigby jams the stick right and wings over.
And about the time that I get a line on him, I can't find my gun sight.
I mean, it's gone. The bulb is burned out, and this is a brand new aircraft.
Accurate gunnery is now nearly impossible.
I'm kicking rudder back and forth, and I'm spraying quite a bit.
Incredibly, Rigby scores hits. The 190's engine belches smoke and tumbles out of control. Rigby soars over the wreckage of his victim and heads back toward Asch. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sandy Moats and his wingman throttle up and join the Furball. Immediately, tracers engulf the Mustangs. A pair of 190s are making a high-speed attack. Moats will use the 190's speed against them. Along with his wingman, he'll break into the attack, forcing the 190s to overshoot.
I called for my wingman to brake at his turn left, and he did. The one that was beside me overshot, and as I came in behind him, he got right in my gun sight.
As his foe careens into the ground. Another 190 lines up on Moats' tail. But luckily, another blue noser, Major Bill Halton, has the German in his crosshairs. Moats flies on, soaring into the midst of a swirling dogfight in the slag heaps.
Well, it would seem strange to be down flying at that low altitude, dodging a bunch of small hills of slag heaps. On the other hand, there were so many airplanes all over the top that were kind of pressed down into it.
A half-mile west of Moats, screaming across a snow-covered field. P-47 pilot Bob Brule is still locked in a 300-mile-per-hour chase, scant feet off the ground. He's fired volley after volley, but scored no hits.
The first dogfight I'm in, I couldn't stop shooting, but I finally did stop and just followed him a little bit behind him, a little bit above him. Then I saw a puff of smoke from his engine. And I immediately retarded the throttle because I thought, I'll bet he pulled his throttle back.
As his enemy slows down, Brule drifts into formation.
I was just above him, and I contemplated taking out my .45 and shooting him because he was so close.
To prevent a stall, the 190 is forced to accelerate. Suddenly, a tree stand looms in front of him. The Focke-Wulf pitches up to avoid the obstacle.
And as he pulled up, I was able to pull a lead on him and got a good burst into him.
At 350 miles per hour, the 190 bellies in. An oily black fireball blooms in front of Bob Brule.
I was covered with oil, and I couldn't see at all. I pulled back a little bit to make sure I didn't run into the ground. Finally, the wind stream parted the oil enough so that I could see through it.
Brule swivels his head, searching for another target.
Then just another FW-190 pulled right in front of me. So I went after him.
Brule pulls lead and fires a burst. He fires again, but to his dismay, his guns stop. He's out of ammunition. A critical mistake. As Brule's mind races through his options, glowing fireballs arc over his canopy.
I look back and holy crap, there's an ME-109 sitting there.
The German lobs deadly 20mm cannon rounds at Brule.
I was in a left turn, and they always told us to turn to the right with an ME-109. They had a bad stall characteristic and a turn to the right. So I started to roll to the right, but then I said, heck, I'm already in the left turn, I'll just continue that. So I just reversed my roll.
Brule's inadvertent feint to the right fools the 109. The German has lost the edge. His fire now falls short of the P-47.
I looked back and I could see him shooting at me. And he's got two machine guns up here. And I said, gee, doesn't that look pretty? Honest to goodness, I thought that.
Brule jams the throttle forward into war emergency power. Water methanol is injected directly into the cylinders to cool the overboosted engine. The Jugs Pratt & Whitney R2800 howls with an extra 300 horsepower. Brule's enemy pushes his Messerschmitt to the limit.
And I was gaining on him. And we made about almost a complete 360, and I was going to be on his tail pretty soon.
The German flinches first and breaks away. Brule lets him go. With no ammunition, a chase is pointless. Brule pitches up and gains altitude. He soars over Y-29 at 200 feet.
And I had every damn gunner shooting at me. None of them hit me. But I waggled my wings. I mean, they see us every day with the elliptical wing, the big radial engine, and they still shot at us. And that really pissed me off.
10 square miles of Belgian countryside are now engulfed in battle. The Americans have bloodied the enemy, but they're still outnumbered. The fight is far from over. January 1st, 1945. The fight over Y-29 intensifies. The stakes couldn't be higher. This is a key battle in the midst of a wider German air offensive. If the Allies are victorious on this day, the Luftwaffe will be broken as a fighting force. In stunned amazement, personnel on the ground watch the battle unfold.
People were just standing there and watching like a football game. Get that guy. He's on his tail. Just cheering him on as best we could from the ground and steering those airplanes. And it was just a deadly game to be watching.
With almost no warning, a 109 roars in to make a strafing pass. Creamer ducks behind a mound of dirt.
And as he passed by, I pulled out my .45 pistol, cocked it, shot a few pipes at it, and it was like maybe hitting a fly with a BB gun.
Above the airbase, the combat reaches a fever pitch. It's become a grueling test of endurance. Pilots fight exhaustion. They must stay aggressive while conserving fuel and ammunition. Lieutenant Al Rigby returns to the action. He spots a P-47 with its right wing on fire. It's Lieutenant Jack Kennedy, whose jug was hit hard early in the fight. Kennedy has managed to turn the tables on the 109s that attacked him, despite the damage to his Thunderbolt.
And I see the P-47, he fires on the 109, and I see a couple of strikes on the tail. That 109 cranks that thing around, the P-47 mushes to the outside, and I'm down here, so I just come up from beneath and between them.
Rigby fires a burst. The German pilot is killed. The 109 lurches over, allowing Thunderbolt pilot Jack Kennedy to break off and retreat into the clouds. It's Al Rigby's third victory for the day. Just then, Sandy Motes breaks out of the melee and heads south.
As I pulled up in the area of the slag heaps, I noticed a Focke-Wulf 190 attacking the railroad marshalling yard in Liège, which is just south of the airfield and just south of the slag heaps.
Motes throttles up, closing on the FW-190. The German spots the danger and breaks into Motes.
As he did, he turned shortly to the left and put a plan view for my sight picture.
Motes pulls lead, a 30-degree deflection shot. Range, 200 yards.
All the guns on my right side hit his right wing root, and all the guns on my left side hit his left wing root, and the wings folded up over the canopy, just like that, much like a carrier aircraft. He started to drop straight down, didn't turn and move in any other way, and I flew by him and looked down at him and could see him in the cockpit, and he looked up at me. He didn't have a chance. He looked like his hands were up trying to get out of the airplane, but at 400 feet there was no possibility. He dropped straight in.
To the north, intense combat directly over the base shows no sign of abating.
There was a time then, between that and the next victory, when there was a good deal of effort spent in just keeping from having mid-air collisions with all of those aircraft in this tiny airspace. Finally, I was able to get behind one. Again, at about a 30-degree deflection.
The German brakes hard, but Motes is not shaken. The 650 caliber Brownings in the Mustang's wings erupt. The Focke-Wulf shudders under the impact of the burst. As Motes' third victory smolders, Mustang pilot Captain Henry M. Stu Stewart spots a 109 and dives aggressively. Stewart stays padlocked on the 109's tail, screaming over the treetops at 350 miles per hour. Both pilots pull 6 Gs, neck muscles straining to keep their heads up. The high G chase bleeds airspeed. If Stewart gets too slow, he'll stall, certain death at low altitude. He carefully works the throttle, his senses tuned to his Merlin engine's every shake and quiver. Whoever stalls first dies. January 1st, 1945. The legendary dogfight over Y-29 enters its final stages. Lieutenant Henry Stu Stewart turns around a slag heap east of the field, a 109 just ahead of him. He fights to pull lead for a shot, but must avoid stalling out.
The solution he came up with was that rather than trying to cram more power on, he lowered his flaps, which came down almost flush from beneath the bottom of the wing. That gave him additional lift for the same amount of power, and consequently he was able to maintain that tight turn and stay behind the 109 so he could shoot.
After the third turn around the slag pile, Stewart pulls lead on his enemy. His finger closes around the trigger, but nothing happens.
Then he realized that in the excitement of that intense combat, jostling around in the cockpit, his knee had hit the safety over the gun switch.
In a frenzy, Stewart rips the metal guard off the safety. 50 caliber rounds shred the 109. Stewart soars over the slag heaps. High above him, P-47 pilot Bob Brule watches a lone 190 trying to escape with 2 Mustangs in hot pursuit.
He was heading east, but he was starting to go under my wing. So I rolled over like this so I could keep my eye on him, figuring I didn't want him to shandell up and get me. He must have seen me, and he turned up to meet me head on.
The Mustangs seize the opportunity and fire a long-range deflection shot.
I always thought I should have gotten an assist that kill.
To the west, Brule spots a lull in the action over Y-29. He makes a quick approach and sets his Thunderbolt down before combat returns.
I landed and moved to the end of the runway. I suddenly saw 2 Me-109s coming over to strafe our field. I says, holy crap, here I am sitting there with the engine turning over. Well, I shut the engine off and bailed out of the airplane.
The 109s roar over the field, pursued by a P-51 300 yards in trail.
Of course, the Yak-Yak gunners opened up. They never leaded the planes enough. I mean, they're coming in full blower, doing probably 350, 375 miles an hour. And they hit the 51. Then we said, no, you got to hit the wrong one. And while we sat there, we saw him hit the 51, and he just came around, dropped his gear, and landed.
The unfortunate Mustang pilot is Dean Huston. Huston guides his wounded P-51 off the PSP, coasting to a stop. A frustrating end to the day for him. But at that very moment, his flight lead, Sandy Moats, roars over the southwest end of the field. He's made a series of head-on passes with a Focke-Wulf 190. Abruptly, the German makes a break for home. Moats cranks his Mustang around, slipping in trail of the retreating 190. He fires several volleys, scoring hits from wingtip to wingtip. But the rugged Focke-Wulf 190 absorbs the punishment. Another burst, and the 190's drop tank ignites. Then, an explosion rocks the Mustang.
A flak blast went off right between my propeller and my right wing root. Made a loud noise, a bright flash, startled me, of course, and I pulled out to the side to see if I was all right.
Incredibly, his Mustang appears undamaged. Moats drops in on his mark again, firing another deadly accurate burst.
I pulled back in on this aircraft, and this time above him because my guns had been shooting low. Then a fire burst which hit him on the right side of the cockpit. With just a few rounds, he just turned over and went straight in.
Moats breaks off the chase and returns to Y-29. Over the airfield, Al Rigby circles, picking a target. With little ammo left, he must be judicious.
I don't know now that I've got even a round left. But here's two P-51s mixing it up with a 109. And I mean that 109 is good.
Rigby makes diving passes at the expertly flown 109. But the German makes a mockery of his attempts, kicking the tail around and diving for airspeed before Rigby can even hope for a shot. The other Mustangs in the fight circle, making passes of their own. But the 109 evades them all, firing as opportunity allows.
The 109, for one maneuver, he rolls that thing over on his back and does a split S from what I guess to be perhaps 1,000 feet. But I can still see that 109 as he pulls that thing out, the pre-top shutter and wing trips and streamers, and he's back in the fight.
The German holds them at bay with guts and superior airmanship. The P-51s have him boxed in. Somehow, they've got to knock him out. January 1st, 1945. Over a forward airbase in Belgium, designated Y-29, a sprawling dogfight has seen some of the most intense air combat of the war. Now, Mustang pilot Al Rigby, with two other P-51s, have engaged the best German pilot they've ever seen. Just then, Sandy Moats returns to the area. The expert 109 stumbles across his path.
He broke into me, that is, he turned into me in an aggressive manner. But as I turned into him to try to get behind him, he pulled straight up, which is kind of a surprise.
The 109 barrel rolls in an effort to shake the Mustang. Moats follows through the dizzying maneuver. Then, unexpectedly, the 109 chops his throttle and tumbles.
As he spun down, I thought, well, there goes number 5. The simple reason, as I watched him spinning down, there's no way he could have pulled out from that low altitude. Amazingly, he did pull out. And I had no more ammunition. All I could do was look and watch.
But the stunning maneuver proves futile.
One of these P-51s fires, and I see what I think is a couple of hits on this guy. Turns him directly in front of me. He's right here, I'm right here. All I have to do is a hard left, point the nose ahead, and the last of my ammunition shatters the cockpit. I'm close enough to see the pilot, the shatter, everything. So now I don't see any more fight. As far as I can see, the fight's over.
The remaining Germans retreat. Sandy Moats, Al Rigby, and the rest of the fighters still in the air return to base, setting their Mustangs down on the runway at Y-29.
I see about one fire on the field, and I couldn't believe that we had gotten by with so little visible damage on the field.
Incredibly, only one P-47 is shot down in the attack, and no Mustangs. The Germans lose 24 aircraft. Only 4 enemy pilots survive to be taken prisoner. The lopsided defeat at Y-29 encapsulated the failure of Operation Bodenplatte as a whole. At 17 different Allied airfields, the Luftwaffe lost approximately 1/3 of the total force put in the air. A staggering number of casualties.
Bodenplatte was a big blow to them. Instead of the Allies, yeah, they did have success. They shot up a lot of Allied aircraft, and the Allies lost some pilots, but the Allies could afford it. The Luftwaffe couldn't. They were at their wits' end. They had no more fuel, no more trained pilots.
It was a blow from which the Luftwaffe would never recover. The action over Y-29 was the centerpiece of this historic defeat.
It was a battle that I don't see anybody could duplicate. With all those aircrafts flying around and not losing a man, it was just unbelievable, just unbelievable.
All of our mechanics and all of the mess people who fed us and all the other people who took care of us, those in the motor pool, the military police who guarded the place. And they got to see for the first time an aerial battle that took place right smack over the airfield, in full sight in front of them, with all of the action and all of the noise and all of the excitement.
At Y-29, the Americans dominated their enemy. Their exploits became the stuff of legend and hastened the death of the Luftwaffe.